Welcome to Only for Your Ears and today's episode. But first, I'd like to start with a thank you to all the consistent viewers that have liked, shared, and subscribed, and also the newcomers. This is very much appreciated. Now for episode 39, The Psyche by Hans Christian Andersen, which I've renamed as The Magic Beneath the Surface. The Psyche, or The Magic Beneath the Surface, is a lesser known fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen that tells the story of a sculptor who creates a beautiful statue representing the human soul, or psyche. The statue is so lifelike and enchanting that the sculptor falls in love with it. I digress. He really falls in love with the reality of the magic of his soul. Reflection, the transformative power of art. The story explores the power of art to bring about change, both for the creator and the created. The sculptor's devotion to his art leads to the transformation of the statue into a living being, while the process of creating and interacting with the psyche helps the sculptor grow and change as well. One night, the sculptor has a dream in which the god of love, Eros, appears to him. I digress. His unconscious mind brings him a message in the form of a god to take the higher authority. Eros tells the sculptor that if he wishes to bring the statue to life, he must exchange his own life for the statue's. I digress. The confusing thing about the God of love, he speaks for the condition to witness such authenticity. This doesn't make sense to me. The sculptor agrees as his love for the statue is so strong that he is willing to sacrifice his own life to give it the breath of life. I digress. The sculptor response is a demonstration of not just true love and sacrifice, but a purity the God of love, in my mind, doesn't possess. Reflection, idealized love versus true love. The sculptor initially falls in love with the statue he creates, which represents his ideal of beauty and perfection. However, as Psyche comes to life and experiences the world, she becomes a more complex and raw person, and the sculptor learns to love her for who she is rather than the mere idea of her. This transformation can be seen as a commentary on the nature of love and the importance of seeing and accepting others for who they are rather than just the outward appearance. Isn't that what we're all trying to achieve even in today's very superficial society? As the sculpture's life force leaves him, the statue comes to life and transforms into a beautiful woman. I digress. The beauty of the sculpture's life force. She is grateful to the sculptor for giving her life and falls in love with him. I digress. But of course, she looks at him as her hero, her salvation, while mourning his lifeless body. Eros, moved by the sculptor's love and sacrifice, grants him a second chance at life. I digress. Yes, the God of love witnessed what true love really is. My. It had to take this experience for him to really know this. Reflection, the transformative power of art. The story explores the power of art to bring about change, both for the creator and the created. The sculptor's devotion to his art leads to the transformation of the statue into a living being, while the process of creating and interacting with the psyche helps the sculptor grow and change as well. This highlights the deep connection between an artist and their work, of course, as well as the potential for art to inspire personal growth and discovery. This has been a long known theme. The sculptor and the living psyche are united in love and they live happily ever after, illustrating the power of love and the beauty of the human soul. The tale serves as a reminder of the importance of love, compassion, and the enduring spirit of the human soul. Bravo. Reflection. Overall, the psyche multifaceted, is a multifaceted story that invites readers to reflect on love, art, and the nature of human experience, all while enjoying the enchanting narrative that is characteristic of Hans Christian Andersen's work. This is a wonderful fairy tale, and most of them are actually about art and love and the soul and the spiritual connection that brings about true love and life. I love this fairy tale because the god of Eros, who is supposed to be blessed with the all knowing wisdom of what true love really is left speechless by his own demands, which makes him forego his traditional ideas and mindset. The Greek god is shocked to realize that he really didn't know the essence of love until the sculptor brought his art to life. This mythological god is full of the conditions one would expect in a contract or in some respects religious institutes and the Bible. But when true feelings such as genuine love illuminate our beings, such phenomenon cannot be denied. And in a lot of cases, the invisible boundaries we put in place collapse under the facade we present to the world. Race, class, sexuality, and wealth are the superficial safeguards we call our standards. But that's only so we can continue to remain in the same social circles that make us feel a false sense of belonging. I know this to be true because once we begin to break just a little bit with family tradition, you start to see the family apparatus coming apart at the seams, and the relations you once thought were solid turn into rubble quickly. There's a saying, when you get married to the family too. This is so true. Let's take a look at some noteworthy examples from films to frame the parallel between the fairy tale up to modern day storylines. The first example I'm going to use is a German film. It's called Sugar Babies, and I'll use the digress in one of the in the summary to introduce it. I digress. He really falls in love with the reality of the magic of his soul. Now, in Sugar Babies, Marianne is a middle aged, overweight, slovenly, and lonely assistant to a funeral director in Munich. How sad. Her life revolves around relaxing in an indoor swimming pool, commuting on the subway between her apartment and the funeral home, and munching candy bars in bed while watching television, which is how she revisits her teenage crush for the pop singer Peter Krause and his hit Sugar Baby. On one trip, becomes aware of a train driver attracted by his announcing voice. He is young, tall, lean, and blonde, not unlike Krause, the Sugar Baby man. And Marianne becomes obsessed by the process of the subterfuge and the detective work. She learns his name, Cuba, marital status, a cold, overbearing wife, and favorite candy bar. She starts taking exercise, dressing smartly, cooking regular meals. She learns to interpret the subway network, complicated shift roster, and makes a point of occasionally crossing his path, perhaps giving him a smile of recognition. She dresses up her drab apartment and installs a new double bed. I mean, this woman, talk about manifestation. She's really going all the way out. So she hasn't even got the man yet, but she's determined. Marianne learns that Huber's wife will be away for 2 weeks. The plot thickens on account of a death in the family and puts her plan into action. She invites him to dinner the next evening. She cooks a roast and sets the table for a romantic interlude. But when he fails to arrive, she breaks down sobbing, crying furiously, and destroys the table setting and much else besides. The roast is burnt. Then he arrives late because of an emergency at work. They make love and it moves and he moves in with her very quickly. I digress. This is way too fast. Where does his loyalties lie? She takes holidays, buys him new clothes, and he takes her places on his motorcycle and they share intimacies. It's like they're on a honeymoon. Her unhappy childhood and his fear of being a driver involved in an unavoidable fatality. They enjoy each other's company and she fantasizes a life together. They go to rock and roll dance evening, and when the band plays a sugar baby, they let their hair down, and the other couples stand back and give them space. Frau Huber, who has returned and found Marianne's address in her husband's work jacket, storms in to the crowd, separates, and furiously assaults Marianne, Huber cowering among the onlookers, leaving Marianne bruised and dazed on the dance floor. Frau Huber marches her husband out of the hall. In the last scene, Marianne, still bruised, is standing on the edge of the platform, holding out her candy bar as the train approaches. Now, it was a total fantasy, but I think what happened with these two people when they engaged, when they related to each other. In a sense, this relationship rejuvenated both their lives, irrespective of the immoral code of infidelity. It takes two to tango, and if Proust didn't feel his life was in a slump, he would never have taken the bait, which is very true. So she she did something for their marriage and probably helped their marriage in the long run. So life entering new life, breathing new life into a stale marriage. Now, of course, let's take a look at Pride and Prejudice. Now, this is another story, but it runs along the lines of what was happening in society back then in the time of Jane Austen when she wrote this book, but also even in today's society with what you would call, in some cases, the upper crust, especially you definitely see it in the royal family. I think um, Prince William and Catherine situation is very rare, and also Harry and his wife. but more so William is a rarity. But normally with these royal marriages, it's very structured and you can't really go outside the tradition or boundaries that much. Now, Pride and Prejudice. As the sculpture, I digress. As the sculpture's life force leaves him, the statue comes to life and transforms into a beautiful woman or man. I digress. The beauty of the sculptor's life force. She is grateful to the sculptor for giving her life and falls in love with him. I digress. But of course, she looks at him as her hero, her salvation, while mourning his lifeless body. Eros, moved by the sculptor's love and sacrifice, grants him a second chance at life. I digress. Yes, the God of love witnesses what true love really is. Now, let's take a look up. During the late 18th century, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet and their daughters, you have Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, Lydia, live at Longbourn, their estate in rural England. Mrs. Bennet, eager to secure suitable marriages for her daughters, is delighted when wealthy bachelor Charles Bingley moves into a nearby Nether, Netherfield Hall at an assembly ball. Bingley, his sister Caroline, and his friend Mr. Darcy meet the local society. Bingley and Jane are immediately taken with each other, while Elizabeth instantly dislikes the snobbish Darcy and overhears his dismissive remarks about her. Well, Darcy's basically a robot, a frightened boy inside a robot, afraid to express himself and show his feelings. Let's continue. The story has many twists and turns with lots of misunderstandings. The minimal verbal exchange between them at times and the unspoken intensity defies some of their true feelings for each other. We also have to remember that there was a strict class system during this time. One never married beneath their social ranking. Intellectually, they were a complementary match for each other. Yes, Elizabeth and Darcy were an intellectual complementary match for each other. I think this surprised him. I think it truly surprised him. I don't think it surprised Elizabeth, but it truly surprised him. And then his feelings got deeper for her. This is a moment in the film where Elizabeth is bewitched. There is a moment in the film where Elizabeth is bewitched by a statue which portrays a similarity to Darcy. And I believe then she falls in love with him, but tries to bury her feelings. She tries to bury the feelings inside of herself. And she also tries to ignore or squash down the life force coming from the sculpture that she sees that reminds her so much of Darcy. She starts to see Darcy's soul in the actual statue, I believe. Bingley and Darcy return to Netherfield and visit Longbourn. Bingley proposes to Jane, who accepts, and late that night, Lady Catherine arrives to see Elizabeth and demands she never become engaged to Darcy. Oh, yes, this is the woman who has a daughter who she wants Darcy to marry. And it, she could have got her way actually if things turned out to be the way that they should have gone, you know, an arranged marriage. But that wasn't going to work because he actually genuinely was in love with Elizabeth, which is what she could not stop. because she claims Darcy has been engaged to marry Lady Catherine's daughter, who suffers poor health since infancy. Deeply insulted, Elizabeth orders her to leave. Walking early the next morning, Elizabeth encounters Darcy, who apologizes for his aunt's intrusion. He professes his continued love, and Elizabeth, her feelings radically alter, accepts his proposal. She tells her father the truth of Darcy's actions and how he saved her sister, helped her sister get married to a man that he didn't approve of, but she knew that they loved each other. And so he helps them, he gives them a dowry, gives them money, helps them to establish a life. And this is when falls even more in love with him, because he doesn't worry about the class at all. He just worries about the fact that they love each other. She tells her father the truth of Darcy's actions, and Mr. Bennet gives Elizabeth her consent to marry. Overjoyed, she has found love. Now, I know this is a book and it's a story from a book, but I think in some cases back in those days and also in royalty, you have seen some situations of true, true love. And the life, the reason why I picked it, Pride and Prejudice, is when she's looking at that statue of Darcy, and she comments, somebody asks her about it, and she says, isn't that a lovely statue of him? She says, yes, it's absolutely beautiful. And that's when the love that she has been suppressing for so long escapes her, and people can see that she actually loves them. So I think this type of thing does has happens in royalty to a certain degree. And I think Zara Phillips is one of those that she's married to what you call a commoner. He's not part of the royal. He was never, doesn't have a royal status. He was a rugby player, but she loved him, and he definitely brings her alive, and she brings him alive. They're a perfect match for each other, and they complement each other. Now we're going to turn to a true story, an authentic story that a film was made about. It's called Loving. Now let's go to the digress again. The sculptor and the living psyche are united in love and live happily ever after, illustrating the power of love and the beauty of the human soul. The tale serves as a reminder of the importance of love, compassion, and the enduring spirit of the human soul. I digress. Bravo. Richard Loving, I like the name, Richard Loving, a white construction worker in Caroline County, Virginia, falls in love with a local black woman and a family friend, Mildred Jeter. Upon Mildred discovering that she's pregnant, they decide, knowing the interracial marriage violates Virginia's anti mis, mis uh, generation laws, they drive to Washington, D.C. to get married. In 1958, Richard makes plans to build a house for Mildred less than a mile from her family home. They want to do the right thing, plus they love each other. The only thing in the way, it's if it's not class, it's race. Soon afterward, a sheriff deputies raid Mildred's home and arrest the Lovins. When Richard points to the marriage license, Sheriff Brooks curtly tells him that it has no validity in Virginia, and hauls them to the jail. They plead guilty to breaking the anti-miscegenation law and are sentenced to 1 year in prison. This is ridiculous. However, the judge suspends the sentence provided that they do not return to Virginia together for at least 25 years. It's ridiculous, people. The Lovins moved to Washington to stay with a friend of Mildred. They briefly returned to Caroline County so their first child, Sydney, can be delivered by Richard's mother, a midwife. Arrested again, they are cleared when their lawyer informs the judge he erroneously advised them to return. Mildred and Richard have two other children together, Donald and Peggy. However, Mildred grows frustrated by being away from the country, and her frustration grows when she watches the March on Washington. Martin Luther King, John Lewis probably was there as well. She writes to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy to help, for help. After a minor auto accident involving one of their children, the Lovins decide to go back into Virginia, settling in a remote portion of King and Queen County while their case moves through the courts. Their case gains wide attention and is profiled in Life magazine by photographer Gray Villett. Several weeks later, the Supreme Court unanimously holds that laws prohibiting interracial marriage are unconstitutional. The Lovins return to Caroline County and resume construction on their dream house. And epilogue reveals Richard died in a car accident 7 years later. How unfortunate. Mildred never remarried and continued living in the house Richard built for her until her death in 2008. A footnote: Mildred never found another man to compare to the love she shared, or they shared, and the fiery victory and passion that was expressed through their court ruling. I think the difficulty that they went through and the fight that they had to go through in court ignited a deeper life running through the veins of their love for each other and really made them even more committed to each other than before. So I think this is a really beautiful story and heroic story. Both of them were heroes. And she used, yes, the March on Washington, she used the civil rights movement as a way to ignite her passions to call for justice, a cry for justice in her marriage to the only man that she truly loved. Now let's take a look at the trigger points. The trigger points, the first one I'd like to talk about is a surprise at Jezebel's restaurant. Now, I was a dancer for quite a long time in New York, and while I was there, I did waitressing, I did many different types of little jobs in between performing. So when I was studying in New York, I was working at the theatre dinner restaurant called Jezebel's in an off-Broadway district. A lot of who's people dropped in and enjoyed the wonderful ambience and the Southern cuisine, attracted upscale and upscale clientele and multicultural races. Anyway, early one Friday evening, a group of young women walked in with a fairly disabled young woman, whose birthday it was. I was waiting on the table and I was informed that this woman's fiance was going to surprise her. He was British and was coming in from London. Wow. The trigger point for me is witnessing true love beyond society's expectation. When this man walked in, I mean, it's like time stood still and it was so quiet. But the woman didn't know because she had her back to the door. He came in, walked towards her, and I think everybody tried to keep their faces neutral. And then he came and sat down next to her. She was so surprised. And I mean, when I say she's disabled, she was pretty disabled in the hips. And she had special equipment to be able to move her legs. But this man absolutely adored her. When he saw her, you saw the life running through his body. And when she saw him, you saw the life running through her body, even though she was disabled. Here is a man that, and I'm going to give a good shout out to men. Here is a man, a very good looking man, and a very wealthy man that saw beyond her outer appearance and really saw the beauty within her. And well, that was his fiancee. And of course, they got married, and I hope they lived happily ever after. So, the idea that all men are interested in tits and arse, I'm so sorry to have to say this, but I don't believe it's true. There are some really good men out there. Yes, it's difficult to find. They are difficult to find, but it's not impossible. And it's not only that there are only good women, but there aren't good men. There are good men out there too. The next one, another good man, okay, is a Jamaican officer marries a white British woman. Now, these two people are connected to my stepdad's family, okay, because my steps, this she's they were my stepsister, my stepsister-in-law, actually, parents. The Jamaican officer, military man, that marries a white British woman. They have three children in England and they spend their marriage living apart. It's a long distance marriage. He loved Jamaica and wanted to stay in Jamaica and didn't want to live in England, very much like my father. And as much as she liked Jamaica, she was British, and she wanted to stay in England. So they were married. They stayed married for over 30 years, but they had what you call a long distance committed relationship. But there was life beyond their commitment because they had three glorious children. And also, they kept the flame of that marriage going. They had love for each other. I don't think they had anybody else. They didn't have extramarital affairs or anything like that. They were committed to each other. So that was another one. And the last one is, for me, how love has rejuvenated my life. Yes, when I think back to 3 years ago, I was basically a zombie. I was like walking dead. I hated myself and I really wasn't an alive human being. I was just merely existing in a shell of myself. And I was very closeted inside of my own house. I was a hermit. I didn't really live or express myself or, do anything creative. I wrote down creative words, I wrote down creative ideas, but I dared share them with people because they weren't interested, and I didn't really get any support. And I felt that I needed their support. Now, what I've realized now is that I don't need their support. I really, really don't. I have become my biggest cheerleader. But that took a long, 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 long time, people. I want to say that in 2019, I was spoken to through spirit, put it that way. And in that spirit, it was said, Melody, if you can't love yourself, why can't you try to like yourself? And it was very difficult. I couldn't see myself liking myself or loving myself. And I had the most visceral, hateful response to it. Well, I don't know what happened, but a couple of weeks later, I started really paying attention to my health. Just I wasn't sick or anything. I just started juicing more and paying attention and just doing things for myself. It's like pampering myself, that is the word that they use today. And I realized that just by pampering myself, that was an act of liking myself. And perhaps eating good food was a way of how I learned to love myself too. So it took a long time. But what was interesting, I think it was one day, a couple of days before I had to have surgery on my breast because I had a malignant tumor, a small malignant tumor there. And what happened was, so there I was lying in bed a couple of weeks before I had to have major surgery to remove a tiny lump in my breast. And I realized that through the act of learning how to like myself and perhaps learn how to love myself, that I had given myself a second chance in life and a second chance in life, love and experiencing what it really meant to live, what it really meant to live and be present and be truly part of this world. I don't believe that I would have witnessed, experienced in my own life God's love if I hadn't made, I hadn't really honestly made the effort to start it myself, to initiate it myself. So therein lies the ending of the magic that beneath the surface in today's episode. The soul, the magic of the soul, and the love that emanates from within us as individuals. So that's the end of today's episode. And I'd like to just say healing is a lifelong blessing, lesson, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong lesson, blessing, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, bye bye.